The gulls circled overhead, their cries piercing the morning air as Detective Michael Reeves stepped onto the windswept shoreline. Montauk Point was quiet this time of year, the beach deserted except for a small cluster of police officers huddled around something on the sand. Steam rose from the coffee in Reeves' hand, dissipating into the crisp December air. "What we got?" he asked, flashing his badge to the uniformed officer maintaining the perimeter. "Male, approximately 40 years old. No ID. Found by a jogger at dawn." The officer lifted the yellow tape, allowing Reeves to duck under. Approaching the body, Reeves felt the familiar weight of a new case settling on his shoulders. The man lay on his back, one arm casually tucked behind his head as if he'd laid down for a nap and never woken up. He wore a dark suit, tailored but not expensive, slightly damp from the morning mist. His shoes were polished to a shine that seemed out of place on the gritty beach. "Time of death?" Reeves asked the medical examiner, who was crouched beside the body. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up, her expression unreadable behind her glasses. "Based on liver temp and rigor, I'd estimate between 10 p.m. and midnight last night. No obvious cause of death. No wounds, no signs of struggle." Reeves circled the body slowly. "He doesn't look homeless. Too well groomed. And look at his shoes," Chen pointed with her pen. "Expensive. Italian leather. Recently polished. Any ID? Wallet? Phone?" "Nothing," said Officer Martinez, who'd been first on scene. "No wallet, no keys, no phone. All pockets empty except for a train ticket stub from Penn Station to Montauk, dated yesterday." Reeves frowned. "So he came out here deliberately. But why?" "There's something else," Chen said, gesturing for Reeves to come closer. She carefully turned back the lapel of the man's jacket, revealing the inside label, or rather, where the label should have been. "All identifying marks have been removed from his clothing. Labels cut out. Even the laundry marks." "That's deliberate," Reeves muttered, the coffee in his stomach turning sour. "Someone didn't want him identified." "Here's the really strange part," Chen continued, pointing to the man's hand. "No signs of defensive wounds, no indication he was restrained. Toxicology might tell us more, but my initial impression? He just died." Reeves studied the man's face. Clean-shaven, with strong features. His eyes were half closed, and there was an expression on his face that Reeves couldn't quite place. Not pain, not fear. Maybe resignation. "Has anybody searched the surrounding area?" "We've done a preliminary sweep," Martinez said. "Nothing obvious, but the forensics team is still combing the beach." As if on cue, a young officer jogged up to them, slightly out of breath. "Detective Reeves? We found something." He held up an evidence bag containing what appeared to be a scrap of paper. It was buried in the sand about 10 feet from the body. Reeves took the bag. Inside was a torn piece of paper with 2 words printed in an unusual typeface, "Tamam should." "What's that supposed to mean?" Martinez asked, peering over Reeves' shoulder. "I have no idea," Reeves admitted. "But I intend to find out." Back at the station, Reeves pinned the crime scene photos to the board. Jane Winters, his partner for the past 3 years, handed him a cup of fresh coffee. "So, our John Doe appears on Montauk Beach with no ID, no phone, and no distinguishing marks on his clothing," she summarized. "And the only clue is this weird note?" "Tamam should," Reeves said, tasting the unfamiliar words. "I ran it through a search engine. It's Persian, means ended, or finished. It's from a poem collection called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam." Winters raised an eyebrow. "A poetry fan? Or someone sending a message?" Reeves leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him. "We need to ID him. Check missing persons, run his prints, see if dental records give us anything." "Already on it," Winters replied. "Prints are running through the system now." I've got calls into all the hotels in Montauk, too. If he stayed somewhere, maybe they'll have a name. The day wore on. The fingerprint search came back negative. Their John Doe wasn't in any law enforcement database. The missing persons reports yielded nothing matching his description. The hotels in Montauk had no single male guests matching him either. It was nearly 8 p.m. when Drive Chin called. "You're going to want to see this, detective," she said, her voice tight. "I've finished the preliminary autopsy." The morgue was cold and smelled of disinfectant. The body of John Doe lay on the stainless steel table, a sheet pulled up to his chest. Dr. Chen stood beside it, her face grave. "What did you find?" Reeves asked. Chen pulled back the sheet. "No external signs of trauma. No puncture wounds, no bruising. But when I opened him up..." She pointed to a sample under a nearby microscope. His blood showed traces of an unidentified compound. Some kind of plant-based toxin. It caused his heart to simply stop. "He was poisoned," Reeves muttered. "Yes, but here's the strange part. The concentration was extremely low. Almost like he was exposed days earlier, and it slowly built up in his system. Could he have been poisoned accidentally?" Chen shook her head. "This isn't something you encounter by accident. This was deliberate. And there's more." She walked to a light box on the wall, where she'd mounted several X-rays. He had an unusual skeletal structure. Specifically, his ears. "See this formation here?" She pointed to what looked like a small anomaly in the ear canal. "It's exceedingly rare. If he ever had medical records taken, this would identify him immediately." Reeves felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morgue's temperature. "So we have a man with unusual physical characteristics, poisoned with an exotic toxin, found on a beach with no ID and all identifying marks removed from his clothing. And one more thing," Chen added, pulling a small evidence bag from her pocket. "We found this sewn into the lining of his trousers. A hidden pocket. Inside the bag was a tiny rolled paper." Reeves carefully extracted it with gloved hands and unrolled it. Inside were 5 lines of seemingly random letters. "Ragobabd mliawi tpimpanip mliaboayak samstgab." A code? Winters suggested, looking over his shoulder. "Maybe," Reeves said. "Or gibberish meant to look like a code." "Either way," Chen said quietly, "someone went to a lot of trouble to make this man disappear." The next morning, Reeves was at his desk early, the case files spread before him. The coded message, if that's what it was, had been sent to the FBI's cryptanalysis unit, but he wasn't optimistic about quick results. "I might have something," Winters announced, striding to his desk with a folder in hand. A librarian called in. "Says a copy of The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam was found in the return bin yesterday morning. It wasn't checked out, and it doesn't belong to their collection." 20 minutes later, they were at the Montauk Public Library. The book in question was a small, leather-bound edition. The librarian, a woman in her 60s with silver-framed glasses, had set it aside. "I noticed it because it's quite valuable," she explained. "First edition, probably worth several $100s. Not the kind of book someone accidentally leaves behind." Reeves pulled on gloves before handling it. The book fell open naturally to the last page, where the words "Tamam Shud" appeared at the end of the final verse. But this copy had something unusual. The words had been physically cut out, leaving a small rectangular hole. "The piece of paper we found," Winters murmured. "It came from this book." Carefully turning the pages, Reeves found something else. Inside the back cover, written in faint pencil, was a phone number and what appeared to be an address in Brooklyn. The address led them to a small apartment building in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. The superintendent, a heavy-set man named Garza, checked his records. That unit was rented to a woman named Elena Kostova, he told them. Foreign accent, Eastern European maybe. Moved out about 3 weeks ago. Paid through the end of the month, though. Did she leave a forwarding address? Winters asked. Garza shook his head. Nope. Just left the keys in my mailbox with a thank you note. Did she live alone? Reeves asked. Far as I know. But. Garza hesitated. There was a man who visited sometimes. Tall fellow, well-dressed. I assumed he was her boyfriend. Looked kinda like your guy. He pointed to the photo Reeves had shown him earlier. We need to see the apartment. The apartment was small and spotlessly clean. Too clean. Professional job, Winters muttered, running a finger along a dust-free shelf. This place has been sanitized. They found nothing personal, no mail, no photos, nothing to indicate who had lived there. It was as if Elena Kostova had been erased as thoroughly as their John Doe. The phone number from the book belonged to a burner phone, already disconnected. Another dead end. Back at the station, Reeves stared at the evidence board. 5 days had passed since they'd found the body, and they were no closer to identifying him. The toxicology report confirmed Chen's initial findings: a rare plant-based poison, slow-acting, virtually untraceable unless you knew what to look for. We're missing something, he muttered. Winters looked up from her computer. Maybe we're overthinking this, she suggested. What if it's not international espionage or some elaborate assassination? What if it's something simpler? Like what? I don't know. A love affair gone wrong. A business deal. Something personal. Reeves considered this. The woman, Elena. The super said she had an accent. Eastern European. The Cold War's been over for decades, Mike. Old habits die hard. And there are plenty of new conflicts brewing. He stood up, pacing the small office. But you might be right about one thing. This feels personal. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired classics professor from Columbia University contacted them after seeing a news item about the case. Tamam Shud isn't just any phrase, Professor Elliott explained, sitting across from Reeves in the interview room. In the context of Omar Khayyam's work, it's about fatalism, accepting one's destiny. The entire verse reads, the moving finger writes, and, having writ, moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. Then it ends with, Tamam Shud, it is finished. You think our victim was sending a message? Reeves asked. Or someone was sending a message about him, the professor replied. Either way, it suggests finality. Acceptance of fate. That evening, Reeves couldn't sleep. He sat in his apartment, the case file spread across his coffee table, the coded message staring back at him. 5 lines of seemingly random letters. What was he missing? On a hunch, he tried reading the letters as a simple substitution cipher, using various keys. Nothing worked. Then he remembered something from his military days, a technique called a one-time pad. If the message had been encoded that way, it was virtually unbreakable without the key. But what if the key was right in front of him? What if the key was the Rubaiyat itself? Using a copy of the poem he'd purchased, Reeves began experimenting, using lines from the poem as the key for the cipher. After hours of trial and error, he had nothing. Frustrated, he was about to give up when his phone rang. Reeves, he answered, his voice rough with fatigue. It's Chen. I found something else in the autopsy data. Our John Doe had traces of a very specific type of pollen in his nasal passages. It's from a plant that only grows in a few places in the U.S., including parts of upstate New York. Could he have been killed there and moved to the beach? It's possible. The pollen suggests he was in that region within 48 hours of his death. A new lead. Reeves thanked her and hung up, his mind racing. Upstate New York. What was up there that might connect to their mystery man? The next morning, Reeves and Winters drove north, following Chen's lead. The pollen had been identified as coming from a rare orchid species that grew primarily in a nature preserve near the town of Cold Spring, in the Hudson Valley. The town was small, the kind of place where strangers stood out. At the local diner, Reeves showed the waitress a photo of their John Doe. "Oh, him," she said immediately. "He was in here last week. Polite fellow, kept to himself. Had breakfast 2 days in a row. Did he talk to anyone? Say what he was doing in town?" She thought for a moment. "He asked about hiking trails, I remember that. And he made a phone call from our payphone. Seemed upset afterward." The payphone. Reeves checked the records. A call had been placed to a number in Manhattan. It belonged to a private investment firm called Meridian Capital. What's the connection? Winters wondered aloud as they drove back to the city. A financial firm, a rare poison, a coded message, and a Persian poetry book. I don't know, Reeves admitted. But I intend to find out. Meridian Capital occupied the top floor of a sleek midtown building. The receptionist, a young man with a carefully neutral expression, listened to Reeves' questions about their John Doe. "I'm sorry, but we can't comment on potential clients or employees," he said smoothly. "Company policy." "This is a homicide investigation," Reeves pressed. "Then I suggest you return with a warrant." The receptionist smiled thinly. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Outside, Winters fumed. "They're hiding something." "Obviously," Reeves agreed. "But what? And why?" They were about to return to the station when Reeves' phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Detective Reeves?" The voice was female, accented. "You've been asking questions about a man. I might have information." "Who is this?" "Meet me at Washington Square Park, by the fountain." 1 hour. The line went dead. The park was busy with the usual mix of students, tourists, and locals. Reeves and Winters positioned themselves near the fountain, watching every approach. "There," Winters murmured, nodding toward a woman walking briskly toward them. She was in her 30s, dark-haired, dressed simply in jeans and a gray coat. As she drew closer, Reeves could see the strain in her face. "Detective Reeves?" she asked, her accent confirming she was the caller. "And you are?" She hesitated. "Elena. Elena Kostova." The name triggered immediate recognition. "You lived in Bay Ridge. You knew our victim." She nodded, her eyes darting around nervously. "His name was Alexei Volkov. He was, my colleague." "Colleague in what?" She took a deep breath. "We worked for an intelligence service. Former Soviet bloc country. I cannot tell you which one." "Spies?" Winters asked incredulously. "Analysts," Elena corrected. "We were gathering economic intelligence. Nothing violent, nothing military. But Alexei discovered something troubling. At Meridian Capital." "What did he find?" Reeves asked. "They were laundering money for a terrorist organization. Millions of dollars. Alexei compiled evidence, was going to turn it over to your FBI." She looked down. "Someone found out. So they killed him?" "Yes. But they made it look sophisticated. Like a foreign intelligence operation. To mislead you." "And the code we found?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "A shopping list. Our personal cipher. Milk, bread, apples, it was a joke between us. When things got dangerous, we decided to leave clues that would appear significant but mean nothing. To create confusion if something happened." Reeves processed this. "And Tamam should?" That was Alexei's literary touch. He knew if something happened to him, it would suggest an international conspiracy. "Buy me time to escape." "Why are you telling us this now?" Her expression hardened. "Because I want the Real killers found. Not some international conspiracy. Just greedy men who killed Alexei to protect their money. We'll need you to come in, make a formal statement, Winters said. Elena nodded slowly. I know. But first, there's something else you should see. She reached into her bag and pulled out a file folder. Alexei's evidence. Names, dates, accounts. Everything you need. As Reeves took the folder, a shot rang out. Elena crumpled to the ground, blood blossoming on her gray coat. People screamed, scattering. Reeves pulled his weapon, scanning for the shooter, but saw nothing. Winters was already on her radio, calling for backup and an ambulance, but Reeves could tell from the stillness of Elena's body that it was too late. In the chaos that followed, uniformed officers secured the scene. The shooter had vanished, a ghost in the crowd. But the evidence Elena had provided remained clutched in Reeves' hand: names of Meridian executives, account numbers, transaction details. Later, in the quiet of his office, Reeves stared at the case board. Elena's photo had joined Alexei's. 2 lives ended. But why? Was her story true? Was Meridian Capital really laundering terrorist money? Or was this another layer of deception in an already complex case? The coded message still bothered him. A shopping list? It seemed too simple. On impulse, he tried a new approach, using a different cipher technique. To his surprise, the first line began to form actual words. Not English, but what looked like Russian transliterated into Latin characters. He would need a translator to confirm. And what about the Rubaiyat? Why that specific book? Why cut out those specific words? If it was just meant to create confusion, there were simpler ways. Outside his window, night had fallen over the city. Somewhere in that darkness were answers. And people willing to kill to keep those answers hidden. Reeves gathered the files. Tomorrow, they would execute a search warrant on Meridian Capital. Tomorrow, perhaps, they would begin to unravel the truth behind the man on the beach. But as he locked the evidence away, a nagging doubt remained. Elena's explanation had been neat. Perhaps too neat. And in Reeves' experience, the truth was rarely tidy. The case of the Somerton man, as the press had dubbed him, was far from over. In fact, Reeves suspected, they had barely scratched the surface of a mystery that stretched far beyond a body on a beach and 2 words torn from an ancient poem. Tamam shud. It is finished. But for Detective Michael Reeves, it had only just begun.